One person very early in my coaching career came to me and basically said, I just quit my job. He was in his early 40s. I just quit my job to go back to school to get my PhD. And I need you to help me figure out how to restructure my life around a graduate student income again. It's, okay. Uh, what was your motivation for making this change? And his response was, I'm the only person in my family without one. Now, I don't know if you publish videos, but your look told the whole story. The question you want to ask is, why would you be so, you know, so carefree about such an important decision, or words to that, words similar to that. As a coach, I'm not here to judge. I'm not here to tell you you should or shouldn't be doing something. So if I had sat there and really questioned, are you sure you made the right decision? Maybe you should think about this again. If he had changed his mind, we'd be sitting here, I don't know how many years later, with him still pissed off at me for talking him out of what he thought he should be doing.
Listen to the Vibes.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Listen to the Vibes. And I'd like to welcome Mr. Brian Gorman here. He is a transformational coach, also a public speaker, an author, and a podcast host yourself, huh?
Absolutely.
So I was reading something about a 4-day work week. Now, what's that all about?
Oh, we're going to start there. Okay. Happy to do that. It's a metaphor, first of all. Let me put that out there. A colleague of mine and I have been working together for several years, and probably in 2018, we realized how much lost productivity exists inside of organizations, and how, with putting a number of things in place, one could reduce the number of hours people were working while still producing the same or even better results, whether you're talking about productivity, bottom line, however you want to measure that. And so Tony Carnese and I, in late 2019, applied for a trademark for the 4-day work week. COVID landed about 2 weeks before the trademark did. But again, for us, it's a metaphor. For some entrepreneurs, it means, how can I work 6 days instead of 7? For some businesses, it may be literally, we're working 4 days instead of 5, or 5 days instead of 5.5 or 6. But it may come down to the individual level. We know some businesses where some people are working 4 days a week, and we're not talking about compressing 40 hours into 4 days. We're talking about 4 8-hour days. So in some businesses, some people are working 4 hours or 4 days a week. Others are working less time, 5 days a week, so that they can take the kids to school, or they can be there when the kids get home for after school activities or whatever. It's really about finding that balance between what's right for the customer, what's right for the people in the organization, what's right for the organization to fulfill what it's there to do. But again, it starts with finding out, how do we do what we're doing with less time.
Well, when I worked for the city, we worked 4/10s. And I'll say we got more done in those 4/10s than we did in the 5/8s. And the reason why I say that is, when we'd be on a project, you got to work on a little bit longer during the day, but you were already set up and ready to go. There was less time the breaking down and putting everything up and then taking everything out the next day. And so we accomplished quite a bit in those 410s. I did like it when we got the optional come in on Friday and work 10 hours overtime. Is that kind of along the line of what you're talking about, or?
It is in a way. I mean, what you're really saying is we had this work to get done, and it was more productive for us to sit together for 10 hours to do this piece of work than to break it up across a couple of days.
Oh, yeah. The thing is when you start breaking stuff down and gathering up your tools and cleaning up, I mean, that takes quite a bit. You figure you stop at 8 hours, say you got that 1 hour to get everything put away and then get back to the yard, then you're actually working less than 7 hours in a day. But then when you work those 10s, well, then you were getting 9 hours and you were already set up and getting a lot more done. It's, you hate being right in the middle of putting something together and then have to stop and get ready to go home and then have to do all that setup the next day and then get back in the groove. You're already there. You're getting it done. Get it over with.
Yeah, Kyle, I think we're saying the same thing. You're really working to get the job done, not working to a particular time clock.
Right, right. And also I saw that you do TEDx. What's that like?
I did. That was quite the trip. It was quite the trip for a number of reasons. I had been accepted. It was TEDx Hartford. Had been accepted. Again, it was probably shortly after COVID shut everything down, and we didn't know a whole lot. So they were talking about it was in December going to be in December of 2020, and they said instead of doing it in an auditorium, we're going to be doing it in a hotel ballroom. We'll have tables socially distanced and that kind of stuff. And then as we got closer, they ended up moving it into a studio where it was just going to be the speakers and the studio crew, and they were going to live stream it rather than having a live audience. We were scheduled, I believe it was December 6th of 2020, shortly after Thanksgiving. The day after Thanksgiving, my son was rushed to the hospital with COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a bit scary, quite frankly. But as it turned out, 2 weeks later or whatever this was, we were quarantined at home. And so it was actually a live stream from exactly where I'm sitting now, except my chair was on a box of paper to lift me up a little bit. But it was a great experience because TEDx are organizations independent of TED, and there are TED guidelines that they must comply with. So in Hartford's case, they provided me with a coach that worked with me for several months in preparing for my talk. Not every TEDx organization does that, but it's about how can I tell a story in 15 minutes or less that brings value to any number of people who might be listening. And so it was really a lot of work to get ready to do that.
I know a lot of folks have talked about doing Toastmasters to prepare for things like that. You ever consider that?
I have, and I have some friends who are very active in Toastmasters. Actually, in one of the groups, I do group coaching as well as one-on-one coaching, and was coaching a group inside of an old industry organization. I'll put it that way, just today. And one of the people was talking about how he had joined Toastmasters for that reason, to be prepared to speak publicly. And he said, not only did he learn how to speak publicly, but it really propelled his whole life in a different direction. And it changed how he interacts with his family, with his children, with his wife. And it inspired him to become a coach for his kids' soccer team and so forth. So I think the message, yes, Toastmasters is great. The bigger message for me is, where are those opportunities that we get to enrich our lives? And let's bite into that apple.
So when you go to say a group setting, how do you work with a whole bunch of people compared to that one-on-one?
By teaching them how to work one-on-one with one another.
Ah, okay.
So let's say you and I are in a group. I'm running the group. You're one of half a dozen people in that group. First of all, that group has some common thread. So it could be anything from single parents to first-time managers to we're all at a certain level in the organization, and we're facing common challenges. And so one of the first things you're going to learn is, how do you coach another person? What are the fundamentals of having a coaching conversation? So when Kyle comes in and says, I'm really struggling with, I have to have a really tough conversation with someone on my team who just isn't performing. Rather than me saying, Kyle, this is what you should do. Or rather than me saying, Kyle, let me ask you questions so you should figure out what to do, which is a coach approach. I turn to the group and say, what questions do you have for Kyle that might help him chart his path forward? And it's not about giving advice to Kyle, because what works for me is not going to work for you. It's about using what I have learned about having difficult conversations to ask you questions to find your path again. So the whole group becomes coaches.
Gotcha. Well, when I worked for the city, I ended up becoming a foreman or a supervisor. And when it came to performance, it was easy for me to bring somebody in and talk to them and get them motivated to do what they're supposed to do. The hardest thing that I ever had to do was when I had to pull somebody in and tell them that they stunk. They needed to take a bath. Have you ever been approached by something like that?
Actually, I was.
Oh my God.
Many years ago, I was director of annual giving at the University of Minnesota. And there was a pod of three different administrative staff members who had like these nose-high partitions. And they were sitting sort of in a triangle. And one of the women had terrible, terrible hygiene. And you're right, it's a challenge. And sometimes as managers, we have to take on even personal hygiene challenges.
I felt bad for his crew because they're stuck in this truck together.
Mm-hmm.
And, the guys were like, man, this guy stinks. You got to do something about it. And I really liked the kid. He was a good kid. He worked hard. He was trying. And I was like, man, I got to tell you something. I don't want to have to tell you this, but the guys have kind of complained that you have strong body odor. That was the most difficult thing I've ever had to do in my life.
And what was the outcome?
Well, believe it or not, he took it very well.
Mm-hmm.
And he made sure his he wore clean clothes and he took a bath every day and that thing. So, I mean, he changed. I give him that. And he,
Absolutely.
you know, it's embarrassing for both of us. And I felt bad for him, but I mean, it's something that had to be done.
Well, and if you hadn't, and I don't know how long ago that might have been, but who knows whether anybody would have. And his success, his ability to build relationships, because who wants to go out for a drink with him afterwards, right?
Right. Well, was he?
He'd clear the bar out.
That ain't no lie.
So as difficult as those conversations are for us as managers, as supervisors, as leaders, they're important.
Yeah.
They make a difference.
Well, it was either that or I was going to have a revolt on my hands.
Mm-hmm.
Now, also notice you're an author, and tell me about your book.
So I'm not a book author. I am a chapter
okay.
author and an article author. I spent a couple of years as a member of the Forbes Coaches Council. And during that time, I published 24 articles online around different aspects of leadership and change, some of which have been read. I just referenced one for a client and had to go in to get uh, the link for it, and it's up over 20,000 readers.
Wow.
And then so I've got those 24 articles out there. About I think 2019, maybe 2018, I wrote a chapter called The Hero and the Sherpa. And it's about the change journey. I've spent my entire career working in the area of change. So it takes all of my lessons learned and puts them into a chapter to help people understand how they can go through transformational change or guide others through transformational change. That chapter was published digitally because Springer International had already published the book that it was to be included in. So it was to be included in the Handbook of Personal and Organizational Transformation, which is a 2-volume textbook, and their initial intention was to collect more chapters, reissue it as a 3-volume book, and so forth. So it's been out there online for several years. They decided late last year that they're publishing a new book, which has just come out within the last month or 6 weeks, called Personal, Educational, and Organizational Transformation. And it is the lead chapter in that book now.
Oh, wow. Well, you're talking about your personal experiences. Somebody comes to you. Well, let me put it this way. I've talked to a lot of transformational coaches and life coaches, business coaches, and each one's unique. But what sets you apart from everyone else, and why would I recommend you?
I think there are a couple of things that are, and I won't say unique, but certainly are important aspects of how I approach my job.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, it's not a job. I began my TEDx talk by asking the question, what makes your heart sing? Coaching my clients, helping them find what makes their heart sing, and guiding them as they learn to sing along, that makes my heart sing. So I am passionate about this work. I'm 73 years old. Most people my age are on the golf course or, in the backyard or I love what I do. I love getting up every morning to do it. So I think that sets me apart, along with the fact that in one way or another, I've been doing this for over 50 years.
Wow.
So I think that's another important piece of it. Another important piece of it is, yes, I learned how to coach. Yes, I learned what that change journey is. And oh, by the way, there's actually only one change journey, and we take it over and over and over again. Um, but I also have learned and continue to learn. I'm constantly learning. I've spent the last several years learning the neuroscience of how people respond to change, how people move through change. How can we use neuroscience of conversation? How can we use the neuroscience of story to help people make transformational change in their lives?
I imagine a lot of people want to change, but there's got to be some that find it very difficult to change.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And even when we want to change, and this is one of the things that um, not a lot of people pay attention to, even when we really want to make a change, it means letting go. It can even mean grieving for what was in order to make room for what will be. So change is not easy. One of the things that I would invite every listener to keep in mind is when we go into a really big change, we go in not knowing what we don't know. It's sort of like the honeymoon, right? Then we begin to learn things and we begin to question whether we've made the right decision. Sort of like after the honeymoon.
Right.
That is not a sign. All too often, the response is, I made a mistake. That is a natural part of the change cycle. It's not a sign that something's wrong. Now, you may have made a mistake. That's not to say you didn't. But so many people assume that when they begin to question the decision must have been wrong.
You think a lot of people decide that they need to make a change only when they're losing money, or is there another factor where they finally say, it's about time?
COVID woke a lot of people up.
Yeah.
It woke a lot of people up to the fact that they were really sacrificing what was important to them to show up at work every day. That it woke them up to the fact that all they were doing was showing up and coming home with a paycheck. There was no sense of purpose, no sense of I'm doing something of meaning, I'm making a difference. And so the great resignation was really driven by people looking to make a change in fundamental ways in terms of how they were living their professional lives, um, at whatever that meant, and how that was blending or not with the rest of their lives.
Mhm. Well, I can only imagine how many people you've worked with through the years, but do you have someone that was like a really big challenge that you could share?
Um, Probably any number. Um, but let me give you a couple of stories real quick. One person very early in my coaching career came to me and basically said, I just quit my job. He was in his early 40s. I just quit my job to go back to school to get my PhD. And I need you to help me figure out how to restructure my life around a graduate student income again. It's, okay. Uh, what was your motivation for making this change? And his response was, I'm the only person in my family without one. Now, I don't know if you publish videos, but your look told the whole story. But the question you want to ask is, why would you be so, so carefree about such an important decision, or words to that, words similar to that. As a coach, I'm not here to judge. I'm not here to tell you you should or shouldn't be doing something. So if I had sat there and really questioned, are you sure you made the right decision? Maybe you should think about this again. If he had changed his mind, we'd be sitting here, I don't know how many years later, with him still pissed off at me for talking him out of what he thought he should be doing.
Wow.
He lasted in that program literally 2 days, Kyle. And then he came back to me and said, I made a mistake. Help me figure out what I should be doing next in my life. So I think that's one example. Very often, for people, it is driven around career. It is driven around, was working with a major company with their high potential leaders. These were a very small group. Each year they selected, I think, 12 or 15 people that they thought had a real career future with the company. They could really grow and move up and move into senior leadership positions over time and so forth. And so they had coaching, they had group work sessions, they had individualized learning plans, and on and on and on. And this guy came into one of my coaching sessions, and he said to me, I don't belong here. I joined this company when I was the second person in the IT department. There are a couple hundred of us now. I helped build that. That's what I do. I don't sustain things. I don't maintain things. I'm a creator. I'm a builder. I don't belong here. And I said, so what do you want to do? And he said, I want my boss to help me find a place where I do fit. Now, I don't know about you, Kyle, but I have never in my career had that kind of conversation with my boss.
No. Gee, boss, where do I fit in?
Because I don't fit here.
The unemployment line.
I don't want to be working for you anymore. And so I coached him to help him prepare for that conversation. And at the end of the day, so to speak, his boss helped him find the kind of position where that replicated when he first joined that organization in a new startup.
Oh, that's pretty awesome, though. Well, surely there's been somebody you just want to snatch him by the collar and say, wake up, right?
I don't work with them. I typically will have a upfront session at no fee. And there are a number of reasons, but among them, you can't explain what it's like to work with a coach. You have to experience it. And then I want you to feel like I can bring value to you. And I want to feel the same. I want to feel like, I don't want to waste my time. I'm not doing this to make the money. I'm doing this to help people become more of who they want to be. So I'll just give you one example. Was an unemployed attorney, and we went into, basically I do about a 45 or 50-minute coaching session in this scenario, and it became very clear to me that I wasn't going to work with him. And I kept trying all the way through that 45 or 50 minutes. And when we got all done, um, he looked at me and he said, "So what do you think?" He said, "I'm a pretty good attorney. I can argue both sides of anything." Well, I'm not here to argue both sides of everything or anything with you, you know? And if that's how you're going to approach the coaching, if I took you on as a client, I think you're right. I'd probably slap him upside the head at some point. So I just said, I don't think this is a fit.
You think it's more challenging to help the younger generation or the older generation?
Yes,
Both, huh?
it is such a personal, individual thing. I have worked with probably up to mid 70s. I mean, I've worked with more than one retiree who has said the equivalent of, "I'm burned out on what I used to do. And if I'm sitting around here doing nothing for the next 20 years, I'm really going to be pissed at myself. So help me figure out where I go next." Um, and I have worked with the youngest was a high school junior,
Hmm.
and who said, "I want to be a astrophysical engineer."
That's
And
ambitious.
she said, "The world doesn't think that as a female I belong there." She's going into her junior year in college now, pursuing exactly the career that she wanted to. Um, it's about motivation. It's about um, really being committed to doing the hard work. Transformation is hard work. It's about being committed to doing the hard work and to being willing to challenge yourself to overcome the obstacles that are an inevitable part of the journey.
Have you ever helped anyone outside of their business relationships, their personal ones at home?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Again, give you one example, a woman that I've probably been working with her, and I give a brief, actually, part of her story in my TEDx talk, but we've probably been working together over 6 or 7 years. And when she started, basically, she said, "I'm a single mom. I have my own business. I'm working 24/7. I can't grow my business anymore because I am the value. I have some support staff, but I am the value of the business. I'm working 24/7. And oh, by the way, as a single mom working 24/7, I'm not doing such a good job at the mom thing either." And we really focused on her business and worked on turning around her business, and really a whole new business strategy that allowed her to significantly scale down the time she was working while scaling up the income that she was generating. One day she came on and she said, "I know we were supposed to talk about X, some aspect of her business." She said, "I've mentioned my son to you before. He's living in my basement because he got into a physical altercation with his father, and his father won't allow him in his home anymore." Because, again, she was a single mother. She says, "So he's living in my basement for the last year and a half. He comes up, he grabs his food, he goes down. Um, if we talk, it's not a conversation, it's a fight. He's blasting his music, in the middle of the night. Next weekend, I have to drive him to college. We're going to be in the car together for 4 hours. And I don't want those 4 hours, him sitting in the front seat with me listening to his music through his headphones. because he's playing it so loud. I don't want him to leave home with the relationship that we have today. Can you help me? And so we spent an hour really framing out the conversation that she wanted to have with him. And she had that conversation. It was actually her daughter that I referenced a few moments ago. And subsequently, I coached her son as well when he was a junior in college. She got married, I want to say, a year and a half ago. That son walked her down the aisle.
Oh, wow. That's cool. Mm. You know, when I was working and we had the opportunity to work overtime, I mean, I jumped on it because, I mean, we needed the money.
Mm-hmm.
And it gets hard to balance that, you know, you need to be at work making money, but you also know you need to be at home with your kids.
Yeah.
How do you find that happy medium? It's, you know, especially when, you know, the economy's not the greatest. So you need the money. What do you do?
The best thing I can say about that, Kyle, have you ever tried to stand on one foot?
Oh, when I used to be able to.
And how static were you actually standing?
Not very.
Exactly. We talk about balance like it's this static thing, and it's not. Sometimes, whether it's economic, whether it is just the demand of the job, the need of the client, whatever, sometimes that balance has to tip toward work.
Yeah.
And sometimes it has to balance and tip in the other direction. It's a very dynamic kind of thing where people tend to lose their balance, if you will, is to really respond to urgency over priority. You know, I'm sorry, son, I can't come to the football game tonight. Something came up at work, but there's another game next Friday night. I'll be there. I know I promised you, but there's a client that's really unhappy, and I need to make them happy. So I know next week's an away game, but I'll be there. We tend to let urgency overcome priority. So yeah, sometimes work has to be that priority. And sometimes it can't be.
That's true. I just never wanted my life to be the song "The Cat's in the Cradle." Let's put that way. Yeah.
Yep.
But sometimes, you know, especially when I was on call, I had no choice. As soon as that phone went off, I had to get dressed and get on the road. As
Yep.
much as I wanted to spend time with the kids, now they're all grown ups and they got kids of their own.
And they're having the same wrestle.
Yeah, true.
Yep.
Another quick question. My situation where I had to medically retire, but I wasn't going to sit around and do nothing. That's an impossibility. Do you coach folks like that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Again, I've coached two or three people who didn't retire at a younger age, like it seems you might have, but retired in their 60s and in their 70s said, this retirement thing isn't for me. Help me find what does feed my soul.
I had explained to a friend of mine the other day. See, he says, man, you got to find something else to do. You're not making, thousands of dollars doing this. I'm like, you don't understand. It's it's fulfilling to me because I get to meet so many wonderful people.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it gives me something to do. And I feel like I'm helping other people. So it's not about making $1 million. It's about filling the void that I have from not being at work.
Exactly. Exactly. It's feeding your soul.
That it is. Now, tell me a little bit about your podcast.
So actually have 2 plus 1. How's that?
I got you. I'm in the same
Um,
situation.
to- Tony and I actually have been in business as the Doobie Associates. That is not what most people think about when they hear Doobie. It is DO-BE. It is about what you need to do, who you need to be to succeed as an entrepreneur, to succeed as a business leader. Tony identifies himself as a CPA in recovery. He is very much about process, policy, good financial reporting, et cetera, all the do side of business. And you and I both know a lot of people who know what they should be doing and they're not doing it. And so that's where I show up as the coach and who you need to be to make things happen. So when COVID hit and 4-day work week was not the most important thing on people's minds, we launched our podcast called It's Doobie Time. That's DO-BE, everyone.
It's not 420.
Although the truth is, the fact that Tony and I are the Doobie Associates makes me half a Doobie. It's Doobie Time is coming up on our 100th episode. And that will be our last episode. And then we'll be launching, and that will be at the end of August. And then in September, we are launching a new podcast on 4-day work week. So that's the 1.5, if you will. I do a lot of work with a coaching company. It's actually a professional development company with coaching at its core, called Quantibos. Quantibos is Latin for choose to be your best. And last fall, I launched their podcast called Conversations, spelled with a Q. And we have everyone from our coaches, and we have about 100 coaches at Quantibos now. So sometimes our guests are our coaches. Sometimes they are any number of people who are expert in what they do. So actually earlier today, I hosted a gentleman who lives in Los Angeles, is a film and screenwriter, a storyteller. He was one of the writers for 24, the TV show with Kiefer Sullivan. Kiefer Sutherland. Was a writer for Grey's Anatomy and so forth. And we really talked about story and the importance of story and how we can use story in our lives, use story as business leaders and so forth. So that podcast really is for anyone from frontline worker to senior executive. A lot of our conversations have focused on the adjustments that have to be made in leadership coming out of COVID and dealing with everything from virtual to hybrid work to people approaching the role of work in their lives differently.
How often do y'all release your episodes?
Doobie Associates its doobie time is a little less regular as we're winding it down. So we have, I think, episodes 98, 99, and 100 to release between now and the end of August. So it'll be about every 2 weeks.
Okay.
Conversations comes out once a week.
Where do people go to listen to you?
It's Doobie Time is on the Doobie Associates website, which is dl-beassociates.com. Conversations is on the Quantivos website, quantuvos.com. And then both of them are available on Apple, Google, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Is that the only website you'll have?
Yeah. And then I have my own coaching website as well, which is transforminglives.coach.
So anybody who wants to get a hold of you, you say you have a upfront free one-on-one?
Absolutely.
Oh, awesome.
Just email Brian at transforminglives.coach and we'll get it on the books.
All right. And are you on social media?
I'm on LinkedIn. I'm used to be on Twitter much more than I am these days.
And Facebook?
I'm on Facebook personally. I do have a transforminglives.coach page on Facebook, but I've never found that the people who are looking for me look there. So it's a fairly inactive page, although going back to your earlier question about writing, for more than 120 weeks, I published a blog on my website every week. And then I got tired of doing that. So I started doing Facebook Lives 5 days a week. And so on the transforminglives.coach Facebook page, there are about 120 Facebook Lives, anywhere from 2 minutes to 7 or 8 minutes, about living through change.
Cool. Man, I'm going to put all those links in the description so people can find you real easy.
Beautiful.
And Brian, I thank you for coming on the show, man. I appreciate the conversation.
Thank you, Kyle. I did too.
And also want to thank all you folks out there. If you are new to the channel, well, I hope you'll come back, hit that subscribe button. And for my regulars, you guys are awesome because you make it possible for me to do this. Until the next one, everyone, please take care. Be kind to one another. God bless and peace.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Listen to the Vibes. You can catch us on Buzzsprout or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, and on YouTube. Follow us on Facebook at The Vibes Broadcast Network